we're going to be discussing Rabbi Sachs's insight on the parsha. But I think more than an insight on the parsha, Rabbi Sachs is really discussing a insight on the book of Deuteronomy. Because if you look in the entire book, the book of Devarim, what you find here is something different than the other sections of the Torah. And I think if you want to summarize what Rabbi Sachs is get the point of what he's really dealing with is he's trying to get a clear picture of what Moshe Rabbeinu is up to. What is the goal that Moshe Rabbeinu has? What is he actually doing here in Devarim? Basically, most of the Torah was already we have a lot of the laws already, and where the book of Devarim it is a big book in the Torah, but it actually starts a month and a quarter before Moshe passes away. So it's from Rosh Chodesh Shvat, it's the last year that the Jewish people are in the desert, and Moses passes away on Zion Adar. So we're dealing with 37 days from the beginning of the month of Shvat to the first day of Shvat until the seventh day of Adar. It's about 37 days, and Moshe's, he only has 37 days left to his life, and so he seems to be interested in doing something special during this time, and that's what the book of Devarim is. So the point that Rabbi Sachs, the idea that he presents is that Moshe now is becoming a teacher. Now, of course, we know he was a teacher until now, and his major involvement with the Jewish people always involved teaching. But until now, he also had some other major qualities and major activities, which were praying for the Jewish people, doing miracles for them. And now he's sort of using this time to give them encouragement and give them inspiration, give them motivation, because he's not going to be there in the future. And this is what they're going to have to stick with. I guess a good example of what this idea is like a teacher. There are some teachers that they just want to teach what they're supposed to, and they're supposed to cover the ground. So they teach the whole semester just the topic that they're teaching, but they don't give any skills. So the students, they're not really able to take much out of what they learned unless the exact scenario repeats itself, they'll know what to do. But if they don't have the skills, so in other words, it's not really helping them so much for long term, because very rare to have an exact scenario come up. But if they're given the skills how to study a certain style of studying, if they're given the skills of the vocabulary, the way a person is supposed to delve into it, the depth, so a way of a pathway of delving into the depth, so that gives them something for the future. So this Rabbi Sachs is calling that Moses showed a unique type of leadership at the end of his life, the month before he passes away. He's showing this element of being a teacher, in a certain sense, he's rebuking the Jewish people, and this is meant for their future when he's not going to be around. Now, the truth of the matter is, Rashi does bring this idea in the beginning verses, because the verse, it talks about, it says, these are the things that Moshe spoke to all of Israel, and it's talking about rebuke. It gives all these locations. It says on the eastern, on the side of the Jordan River, in the desert, in the plain, opposite the reeds, in Paran, and Chatzeros, with the Zahav, the abundance of gold. And so it mentions all of these locations, and what does each of these locations mean? So each of the locations are a certain type of admonishment for sins that the Jewish people did. So he didn't mention their misdeeds explicitly because he didn't want to disrespect them, but he alluded to them. And so he assembled them all together, and he told them about Avar Hayarden, the other side of the Jordan, and what this, when it says Avar Hayarden is where he is, he's on the opposite side, the eastern side of the Jordan, and he tells them about Bamidbar, about the desert. Now, what was he referring to? He's referring to when they ran out of the man, they ran out of the food, they ran out of their food that they had originally brought from Egypt, and he rebuked them, and he rebuked them for complaining. And then the other sins in the desert as well, when they left over for the man, and when they weren't supposed to leave over for it, and then he rebuked them for in the plains of Moab, which is the sin of Baal Pa'ar, where they sinned with the Midianite women and the Moabite women. And then it says Moil Suf, which is at the Sea of Reeds. They said, don't we have enough burial plots in Egypt that we have to go to we have to come here to that we have to come here and die in the Sea of Reeds, because the Sea of Reeds was right in front of them. And then Paran and Taifel they complained about the manna, that it wasn't what they wanted. Our soul is disgusted with this type of bread. And then Chatzeros is the argument, the rebellion of Korach. That's the place of Chatzeros, or where they the final one is the Zahav. They had so much gold, and they ended up worshiping the Egel, the golden calf. So all of these are places of rebuke. And again, it doesn't say it so explicitly, but you got to read between the lines. You got to understand what each word is referring to. So I'm just, and Rashi does bring out this idea that there's a concept of not rebuking people until one is about to pass away. Rashi says there's a few reasons for it, that Moshe waited until his time is in verse Gimel, in the third pasuk. It says he rebuked them right now in the beginning of the first day of Shvat, which is 37 days before he passed away. He learned from Jacob that Jacob only rebuked his kids before he passed away, and he says the reason is that if you rebuke them earlier, they might leave and go to Esau. If Jacob would have rebuked them earlier, they would have left him and gone to Esau. And then Rashi says there's actually 4 reasons why a person shouldn't rebuke someone until they're close to passing. so they don't end up having to rebuke them again, so they don't see them and the person will be embarrassed. So he brings a few examples. He also says that Joshua only rebuked them before he passed away, and same thing as Samuel, Shmuel, and David. They only rebuked before they passed. Anyway, so Moshe Rabbeinu is rebuking the Jewish people, and this is something unique. So although Moshe was a leader throughout the 40 years that he led the Jewish people, but here he's taking on this special type of leadership where he's teaching the Jewish people. Rabbi Sachs calls it teacher. He's a teacher. You could say he's rebuking them, but this is the idea that Rabbi Sachs is bringing out. Now, the interesting thing is that he says this very interesting point. He says, if someone who knew nothing about Judaism and the Jewish people were to ask for a single book that would explain both who the Jews are and why they do what they do. So someone wants to know what would be a good book to read. I want to know about the Jewish people. So Rabbi Sachs says something that, I don't know, I don't think I would have thought of this, and I don't know if any of you would have thought of this. But he says he would tell them, read the book of Devarim. Now that's a powerful statement. That basically means that I don't know Devarim good enough, and that's why I don't think I would have chosen that. But what I mean is it's the depth of the meaning of each of the portions in Devarim. But that's a powerful statement. It means we all have to reevaluate do we really are we taking the message of the book of Deuteronomy? Do we have that message? In other words, what Rabbi Sachs is saying is there's something unique about the book of Devarim that is supposed to teach us something about the entire Jewish people, and it encapsulates and dramatizes all the key elements of Judaism as a faith and a way of life. Now, what does he mean? What is he referring to? Anyone have any thoughts on what this refers to?
I think I know what he's referring to. I think he's referring to the history of the nation of Israel from the day they got out of Egypt till the day they got into Israel. He covers all the things that happened since the Yetziat Mitzrayim in Devarim. In Azinu, he covers all of it.
So you're seeing this to mean just the history, and
all the major occurrences to the nation.
Right. It is a great summary of the Jewish people's history. That is correct. That's a great point, Ben. It's a summary of the history, and again, as I mentioned, a lot of it is hinted to, and at least in the beginning, but it does go into much detail as well, and so it is a great summary of our history. But what Rabbi Sachs is mainly getting at is, I think, a little deeper than that. It's something to do with, what do you take from that history? What do you see in that history that's so unique? You know what I mean? He's taking it a step deeper. And so you're right. It is the history that is discussed at length in the book of Devarim.
But he also means if you're looking for it, you're going to find it in Devarim. If that's what you're looking for, you're going to find it in Devarim.
Right. So the question is, where do we find it? Where is it? I also want to find it.
Well, it's a tamtzit. It tells you all the important occurrences. Instead of reading 10 volumes, you can see it in one book.
In one book. But I'm not satisfied with that. I want to see the verse. In other words, you give me a whole book, It's too much. Someone's in an elevator. It's called an elevator pitch. What's the whole Jewish people about? Explain me what they're all about. So he wants a 30-second synopsis of what this is all about. So the book of Devarim,
I
Rabbi
think
Sachs
it takes
is
you
saying,
more than
has
30
this
seconds
all
to
in it.
read his essay too.
Right. But my point is, there must be a way to pick out certain major points from the book of Devarim that he's seeing as the major part. But yeah, you're right. So let's look into a few things. But before I do that, I think someone has a question up.
Rabbi, Susan,
someone's hand is.
It's not that I have a question. I just want to make a comment. Doesn't it depict the Jewish people as stubborn and persistent in their belief of one God?
Oh, okay. I thought you were just going to stop there. Stubborn and persistent.
Big time stubborn.
Other than the wrong things that they did.
So that's a good point. We're stubborn and persistent.
Yes.
In believing in trying to follow the Torah.
Yes.
Okay. That's a good point. I think that's a very good point, that we risk our life, we give up our life for Hashem. We are stubborn in that sense. Okay, yeah, that's a very good point. I think that's a great point, actually. And
I didn't mean to talk out of turn or anything, but that's something
there is a statement. Am K'shei Oiref. We are an Am K'shei Oiref L'mal Yusa. That we are a nation that's negative term, that we are stiff-necked. But it's also used as a positive, L'mal Yusa, that it's also a positive thing. In other words, it's a trait. And sometimes
I don't
these
see it as something negative
are beneficial.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
So even though the verse often uses it as a negative thing, but it does have its positive meaning to it. I don't know if someone were to understand that from the verse, that we are Am K'shei Oiref, we are stubborn and stiff-necked in that sense. Like an outsider reading the Torah, I don't know that they would see that
explanation. I mean, it definitely needs.
That's a good point. I like it. Yeah, I like that point. Okay, Isaac, yes.
I was just going to say, Devarim is the only one of the 5 Chumashim that have general principles to direct us going forward. You have Shema Yisrael in there, V'ahavta es Hashem in Devarim. You have the Aseres HaDibros in Devarim. You have Moshe's predictions in Hazinu as to what will be our future course of history in Devarim. And you have his basic messages. Ma Hashem Shoel. He's asking you the basic things. Choose right, choose life. I mean, it sounds simplistic, but those are the basic principles of Yiddishkeit.
Okay, that's great. Isaac says we have the Shema in the V'hayam Shemaya. We've got the Aseres HaDibros. We have some of the basic principles of Yiddishkeit, of all the basic tenets of Judaism are there in Devarim, and even some very powerful points like what does Hashem ask from you? Only to fear Him, and you have the future, the Shira of Hazina, which is a song that's it says the whole history of the world, everything that ever happens in the world is hinted to in the song of Hazina, which is mind-boggling. That there's the entire world events are all somewhere hinted to in the song of Hazinu. I'm not making that up. That's written.
Yeah.
It's brought in the holy books, and so that
one pasuk. You asked for one pasuk. I have a pasuk. I don't know if it's in Devarim or not, but God is saying is appreciating us going after him in the desert. Lechtechem acharai bamidbar.
Right.
So is that in Devarim? I'm not sure.
I don't think so.
No? Okay.
But
no, it's one of the Nevi'im.
This is a
we read it.
sentence that tells you, that that's why God likes us.
Yeah, that was in Yirmiyahu.
Right. Okay. No, thank you, Ezra. Thank you. So,
We read it 2 weeks ago.
Rabbi Sachs, right. It's in one of the Haftarahs. So Rabbi Sachs is he does pick on a few points that he feels are the major elements of Devarim. He says like this. He taught the people to see themselves as an Am Kadosh, a holy people, the only people whose sovereign and lawgiver was God himself. And his love that he set for the people he rescued from slavery, and he gave in the form of commandments the Constitution of liberty. They may be small, but they are unique. They are the people who, in themselves, testify to something beyond themselves. They are the people whose fate will defy the normal laws of history. Other nations, says Moshe, will recognize the miraculous nature of the Jewish story. So he's got a number of interesting points here that are from the book of Devarim. And he says this is what makes Devarim a book that if you're not familiar with the Jewish people, if you would see these points, you will now have a better understanding. We are a holy people. Our sovereign is only Hashem himself. I mean, these are very powerful points that are in the book of Devarim. So again, we're starting to read the Parsha of Devarim, but that means the entire book. We're starting to read that book, the fifth book of Moses. Of course, we finish it on Simchas Torah is when we conclude the fifth book of Moses. So from now until then, we're going to be reading the book of Devarim. And in this book of Devarim, we have these very powerful points that give an idea of what the Jewish people are all about and why we do what we do. And so Rabbi Sachs connects this with a statement that he found in some poetry. If you want to build a ship, don't drum up people together to collect wood, and don't assign them tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. And what he means is that, I think similar to my example about a teacher not teaching the skills, but just teaching the content, that Moshe here is really teaching the skills. He's giving us, in addition to giving the world an understanding of the Jewish people, he's giving us that understanding and that motivation as well. And he says for the final month of his life, he's delivering a series of lectures that are called Devarim. And he reviews our past, our future. He talks about our future. And he gives some the laws. And linking all the details of law and history into this single overarching vision. And he taught the people to see themselves as this Am Kadosh, a holy people, and the only people whose sovereign and lawgiver was Hashem himself. So this is really the idea of Moshe sort of changing positions from the all-encompassing, I guess, position of Moshe the position of really educating the people. He was the liberator, the miracle worker, but now he's really Moshe Rabbeinu. The literal translation of Rabbeinu means our Rebbe, our teacher. So he's really starting I can't really say starting, because he really was teaching the Jewish people throughout. So that's why it's a little hard to say that Moshe is now changing to become the teacher, but he is becoming an educator in a much more concrete way. I hear some noise. Is someone wants to ask a question, or is there just some background noise? I guess background noise. Okay. Okay, let me continue then. So what's interesting is that we just learned about the Jewish people appointing a king in the book of Samuel, the book of Shmuel. We were just learning about that. And in this essay, Rabbi Sachs brings an interesting point from Rabbi Soloveitchik. He says that in a powerful essay, Rabbi Soloveitchik contrasts the Jewish attitude to the kings and teachers as leadership types. And the Torah places severe limits on the power of a king. They are not allowed to multiply gold, wives, or horses. A king is commanded not to consider himself better than his fellow Israelites, nor turn from the law to the right or to the left. So a king was only to be appointed at the request of the people. So the commentaries, he brings the Even Ezra, who says that the appointment of a king was permitted but not an obligation. The Abarbanel held that it was a concession to human frailty. Rabbeinu Bechaya regarded the existence of a king as a punishment, not a reward. In short, Judaism is at best ambivalent about monarchy. That is to say, about leadership as power. On the other hand, its regard for teachers, he says, is almost unlimited. In fact, he brings from the Talmud that in many laws, there's more of an obligation to respect a teacher than one's parents, because the teacher brought you in. Parents bring you only into this world, the physical world, but the teacher brings you into the world to come. So what Rabbi Sachs is bringing out from this is that the idea of leadership in Judaism is mainly Hashem. God is really our sovereign. The whole idea of kings are really not what we think of. It's not the way we understand it. And even the kings that we had, they were, according to the commentaries that Rabbi Soloveitchik is bringing here, he says that it really was not something that was meant. Number one, it's not the main idea of what a king is. In other words, a king doesn't have the power. So that's number one. It's not the king that we think of. That's not what the Torah talks about as a king. And number two, because their power is very limited. But number two, he says, even the whole concept of appointing a king, it's only based on the people requesting it, and it's a concession to our frailty, and it's could be considered a punishment rather than a reward. So, with all said and done, the idea of Hashem being in charge, and the king is more like our teacher, or the idea of a teacher is even, in a certain sense, there's more emphasis on a teacher than a king. Now, in truth, a king does deserve a lot of respect. We have met many obligations but the way Rabbi Sachs puts it, the regard for teachers is almost unlimited, and in some instances they actually have more respect than they deserve, more respect than a parent, even though according to Torah law a parent deserves tremendous respect, honor, and kibbud of aim, and as ish imay vaviv tiro, a person has to fear their parents. But a teacher is even a greater respect because they are the ones who bring us into the main world, the world to come. So when someone exercises power over us, they diminish us. But when someone teaches us, they help us grow. And that's why the Torah favors leadership as education over leadership as power. It is interesting that it says about Mashiach that he's going to be a nasi and a rav. That his job as a teacher, he has two major positions, as a teacher and as a leader. And so, this idea of teaching the Jewish people, which you may say is surprising for a king, it's not exactly surprising. It is part of the job of the king, was really to be an example of what righteousness really is. So then Rabbi Sachs brings an interesting article, an interesting paragraph he brings from Ben Gurion, and who talks about this idea of what it means to be in a political role, what you're really supposed to do. So he brings this paragraph. I'll just read you the paragraph. Whether you hold humble office in a municipality or in a small union, or a high office in the national government, the principles are the same. You must know what you want to achieve, be certain of your aims, and have the goals constantly in mind. You must fix your priorities. You must educate your party and must educate the wider public. You must have confidence in your people, often greater than they have in themselves, for the true political leader knows instinctively the measure of man's capacities and can rouse him to exert them in times of crisis. You must know when to fight your political opponents and when to mark time. You must never compromise on matters of principle. You must always be conscious of the elements of timing, and this demands a constant awareness of what is going on around you. In your region, if you're a local leader, and in your country, if you're a national leader, and in the world, if you're a national leader. And since the world never stops for a moment, and the pattern of power changes its elements like the movement of a kaleidoscope, you must constantly reassess chosen policies toward the achievement of your aims. A political leader must spend a lot of time thinking. He must spend a lot of time educating the public and educating them anew. So I think what Rabbi Sachs liked about this was about that a leader has to really educate people. And then he says that teachers are like the builders of the future. He says teachers are the unacknowledged builders of the future. And if a leader seeks to make lasting change, they must follow in the footsteps of Moshe and become an educator. The leader as a teacher, using influence, not power, spiritual and intellectual authority, rather instead of coercive force, was one of the greatest contributions Judaism ever made to the moral horizons of humankind. And it can clearly be seen in the book of Devarim, where Moshe, the last month of his life, he summoned the next generation and taught them laws and lessons that would survive and inspire as long as there are human beings on earth. So that is the talk of Rabbi Sachs. I skipped a few things, and I didn't exactly say it as he wrote it, but that's more or less his discussion about the Parsha and the book of Devarim, and the idea about teachers inspiring and leading the Jewish people. And what he's trying to connect is leadership or kingship with the idea of teaching. That seems to be something that he's emphasizing. Now, it is interesting that Moshe Rabbeinu is also called a king, just like Joshua. In certain laws, they're called the king. They're considered a king, and so he's sort of taking that, I guess, that point and developing it, that the king's job was to educate the people. And I think that's why he's bringing these other sources, that the king, that there is a concept of a leader educating people. And that's what we find with Moshe Rabbeinu, his putting a lot of emphasis on in the last month of his life. And you have to understand, he's 119 years old, so he's not a young kid, and yet he's giving these many lectures throughout the book of Devarim. It's all basically his lectures to the Jewish people, and that's what we're seeing, that he's really preparing them for the future and giving them these great points, things that they can take with them and use to be able to always feel inspired and feel that they're able to move forward, even if he's not going to be there holding their hand. So that's Rabbi Sachs's insight. And does anyone want to share any thoughts or have any questions about this? Okay, well, then I'm going to share with you a little insight into the 3 weeks. We know that during this period, it's a period of mourning. And the reason why the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed was because of sinas chinam, that the Jewish people did not have proper respect for each other and love for each other. And it says that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, and Jerusalem was destroyed because of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, the famous story of a man who was very wealthy, and he was arranging a major banquet, and he was inviting all of his friends, and he had a friend whose name was Kamsa, and he had an enemy whose name was Bar Kamsa, and his messenger invited the enemy instead of his friend. And then at the banquet, ultimately, the enemy was there. Maybe he thought that the host was going to make up with him and so on. So he came, and he's sitting there and enjoying a nice meal. And the host comes over to him and says, "Who invited you?" And he says, "Your servant." He says, "Well, you have to leave immediately because I didn't want you to come here." And the man says, "Listen, don't embarrass me. Let me just pay for my meal." And he says, "No, absolutely not. You have to leave immediately." He says, "Listen, how much is this big affair? It's a very expensive affair. Must be about $50,000, this affair. I'm happy to pay for half of the affair, $25,000. Just don't embarrass me in public." And the host says, "Absolutely not." He refused. And so he then says, "I will pay for the entire affair. I will pay for everything, $50,000. Just don't embarrass me like this in public." And the host took him and he threw him out. And there were rabbis there at the event, and they didn't say anything. And so this caused that he went and he made a story up to the government, the emperor, and they ultimately said that they believed that the Jewish people were rebelling, and ultimately they destroyed Yerushalayim. And so the famous saying goes, because of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, Jerusalem was destroyed. And there's a very big question on this story, because who really caused Jerusalem to be destroyed? It was the host and Bar Kamsa. Mainly Bar Kamsa. Kamsa was the one who made up a story and told it to the emperor and caused the emperor to be angry at the Jewish people. It was really Bar Kamsa who made this all up. What did Kamsa do wrong? Kamsa was the host's friend. And the friend, what do you want from him? He might not have even been at the event because they didn't invite him, because they invited Bar Kamsa by mistake. So why did Kamsa lose out? Why did Kamsa get such bad publicity that we say, you know why Jerusalem was destroyed? Because of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. But really, Kamsa did nothing wrong. What did Kamsa do wrong? He's a friend. He has Avos Yisrael. He's friendly with the host and so on. What did he do wrong? And I once heard a great insight. And that is that Kamsa had a friend who was willing to embarrass someone in public. That was Kamsa's friend, the host. Now, if that is a friend, you have an obligation to bring your friend to the realization and understanding of how terrible it is to embarrass someone in public. And Kamsa was a friend of this host, and yet the host seems to have gained nothing from that friendship. Meaning, Kamsa is considered guilty because he did not influence the host to make up with Bar Kamsa. Instead, he was a friend of his. So he allowed his friendship to let the host feel that he's in his comfort zone. He's good. He's a good guy. And therefore, he felt comfortable and confident in what he does. Yeah, he doesn't like Bar Kamsa. He's an enemy of Bar Kamsa. He'll embarrass him. So in other words, Kamsa is considered guilty because he did not protest to the host's way of doing things, the host's feeling of being able to be an enemy to Bar Kamsa and never making up with him, and allowing the host to feel that he's doing nothing wrong. And so this is why Kamsa is considered guilty, because Kamsa really should have, rebuked his host, just like we're learning in the Parsha about rebuke. And this is the Parsha that's always read before Tisha B'Av. So this is something that we have to work on. Number one is our own issues, our own enemies, to try to work on making sure, trying to forgive people that have hurt us, trying to make up with people. And then we have friends. Your friends are relying on you. If they do things wrong, they think that you're endorsing it because you're not saying anything against it. So this is an area where, especially when it comes to embarrassing someone in public, the Talmud says that it's better a person should throw themselves into a furnace than to embarrass someone in public. And not only that, the commentaries on the Talmud ask, they say if it's such a bad sin, it should be considered like the 3 top sins. And the conclusion, at least according to one of the commentaries, is that it is considered like in the same league. And so that is the the emphasis now during these last days of the 9 days, during these days where we're mourning over the temple in Jerusalem, we have to emphasize and think about anything that we could strengthen in the area of Abbas Yisrael, loving other Yidden, even ones that think differently than us and go do things differently than us, for us to have unity and love and care and concern for each other. And so that is the Vart about Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. And I think that's a beautiful insight. You can take it with you. I don't remember the source. I wish I did. I could tell you who says it, but I think it's a beautiful insight. Okay. Anyone have any questions or thoughts? Yes, I see Susan.
What I was going to say was
Susan.
Yes, Kamsa was guilty by omission. He omitted himself from the whole thing, and that was his guilt. He should have stepped up to the plate and told the host, "You did the wrong thing," but he didn't.
It's too late.
Right, too late.
Kamsa should have protested. But you know what? He should have protested before. He should have protested earlier on.
Yes,
even before the whole banquet.
Not only before the whole banquet.
Okay.
The thing of embarrassing somebody like that, not good. Not good.
Right.
Rabbi, I'm a little
confused. Terrible
confused.
sin. Yes.
It's a very
kind
of a trivial.
Yes, Yehuda.
It's on.
Just 1 second. Just 1 second. Just 1 second. I called on Yehuda.
I thought Kamsa wasn't there. Didn't they invite Bar Kamsa instead?
You know, and I'm having a hard time hearing you. I don't know if it's just me and my phone, or is it everyone?
No, I had a hard time too.
I couldn't hear what he said either.
I think he said, I thought Kamsa wasn't there, but I didn't get the second sentence.
No, Kamsa was there.
Is that what you're asking about Kamsa?
Yes.
You're wondering if Kamsa
there.
was at the banquet.
Right.
I would assume he wasn't there. My understanding is he was not there.
Right. So how could he have stopped it?
Because
beforehand.
He was a friend. He should have stopped it much earlier on.
Right.
He must have known that they have a major fight between them, and he should have, as a friend, she must have known about.
But he didn't know that.
He must have known about the host and about his enemies and about his friend. He probably spoke about his enemies.
But he didn't know that Bar Kamsa was going to be invited.
Right. But the point is that he should have made up way before the banquet, because Kamsa should have been a good influence and told him that, you don't like Bar Kamsa, you really should try to work things out with him. So he should have influenced him before as a friend. He should have gotten him on the right path, not that he shouldn't have to deal with such an issue of, should I throw him out? Should I not throw him out? He should have fixed the problem in the bud.
We don't know for a fact that he didn't.
So this is the one understanding of why Kamsa is the fact that the Gemara puts his name there is because he was somewhat guilty. This is one explanation of why it says Kamsa. In other words, this is the source of why would we consider him guilty, because this is what the Gemara is telling us, that it was his fault. It was partially, a mistake on his part. Is that satisfactory, Yehuda?
No.
In other words, you see it from the Gemara. The point is, you see it from the Gemara. The Gemara is saying Kamsa is guilty. It's saying because of Kamsa, the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. So it's putting a little of the guilt on Kamsa.
But it's not giving any context.
Well, Rabbi,
so that's what
Rabbi, why can't you say that the way the Gemara is written, it says because of the affair of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, which means that because of this mistaken situation that happened where because the names are so close, that the wrong person was invited, that's the reason why the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed.
So that would be a very, what you would call a balabatisha way of learning the Gemara. In other words,
oh, so what's wrong with that?
Why do they call it that way? Because when you think of the preciseness of the way the Gemara is able to learn a law from the fact that it uses one type of terminology versus another. So, when you really learn it properly, you always assume that everything is written with such preciseness. And here it's written in a way that it's making someone who seems righteous, making them sound like a wicked person. So not only is it not learning the Gemara, in other words, it doesn't say those words, and it shouldn't. It should say who it is, or the story of Bar Kamsa. Why should it mention Kamsa in it when Kamsa did nothing wrong? So when you learn it with the respect of the preciseness of the Gemara, that's called like a lamdan learns the Gemara. But you could answer it. Your point is that it's called a doichik. It's called you're kvetching in a simple pshat where it doesn't fit with the preciseness that we have for the Gemara. So it's a good thought, but it's not, you don't generally learn a Gemara like that, especially when it's such a derogatory story against someone who seems like maybe they didn't do anything wrong. So that's why you would add this pshat, that it's specifically emphasizing his name. Okay.
I thought Kamsa was the one that threw out Bar Kamsa.
No.
But I guess
See,
not.
look at that. Now that answers your question, Ezra. Look at that. See how look at how someone thought that probably Kamsa was so wicked. He was probably the host. I'm just saying, you see how it really gives a negative name to someone who, if they did nothing wrong. So that's why there is another shot from the Maharsha. I think that he was the one was the son of the other one. So it basically, it seems that the commentaries do want to emphasize that there is some, there's some guilt over there. Okay. Any other questions?
The host was a third person.
Yes.
Yeah, the host was the third person.
Okay.
Rabbi Smith, I have this one quick thing of what a take home, well, one of those take home ideas. Does that mean that we are responsible because of Kamsa and his part that he played, and he was guilty also? Does that mean for us that we are responsible for loved ones or friends or something that we can influence for the positive? That we can change their mind?
Yeah.
If we can do it, we should do
it. I am my brother's keeper. Isn't that what that's all about?
Right.
That's right.
So the thing is, I mean, how practical is that when you look at, like modern day life? It's not very realistic from what I see.
Well, I'll give you an example. Unfortunately, we have in the world all of these crazy people that go around and do these shootings.
Right.
And you think about it, and if the parents, the relatives, the people who know what's going on, and these people who are off, totally crazy and willing to go and murder people, the friends and the relatives who don't go and tell the police about it, the FBI, they are definitely guilty. They have a big responsibility there. So now when it comes to relationships, people, they are relying on you as a friend when they make a person an enemy. Because if they didn't have you as a friend, they would be a little more careful not to make enemies with other people. So, when it comes to these things, of course, it's a very delicate thing because people are very sensitive and they don't like when you rebuke them, as we learned that the people rebuke people only when they're, at the end of their life and so on. But nevertheless, there is of course an obligation, and it's a big responsibility to bring achdus, unity, in a special mitzvah for us to try to influence people for peace. That's what Aaron HaKohen, who just passed away in the parsha that we just read, where Aaron died at the age of 123. His big thing, it says, everyone mourned for him, even the women, the children, because he was involved in putting people and helping people get, have peace. So that is definitely a obligation on us to do as much as we can. It doesn't mean to be, as much as you could do. That doesn't mean someone's responsible if they can't have influence. But but there are, there definitely is responsibility there for us.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone, have a wonderful.
I had a question.
Evening.
Rabbi, I had a question.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, how is it we're learning the importance of rebuking somebody like Kamsa should have done with the host, and at the same time, the lesson of the parsha is don't rebuke anybody until the end, because they may leave you and you won't be able to talk to them again afterwards.
So the idea is that it has to be done like you're walking on eggshells. You have to do it in a very subtle way, but consistently until you win. Keep it up. Perseverance. You got to keep going until you win.
Sei gesund, everybody. Sei gesund.
Thank you.
Slowly, don't
Thank
jump.
you.
Have a wonderful evening. Sei gesund, everyone.
Thank you. You too, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.